was his consultant.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. We're about to get started. I'm Andrea Kelly. I'm the chair of the Land Use Committee. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Land Use Committee. With us tonight, committee members from Ward 1, we have Councillor Allison Leary. Again, I'm Andrea Kelly. I'm from Ward 3. We have Councillor Randy Block from Ward 4. On Zoom, but with us on LearnLine virtually is Andrea Downs from Ward 5. Ellen Lobovitz here in the chamber from Ward 6. Mark Laredo, President Laredo from Ward 7, and Stephen Farrell from Ward 8. Or did I flip that? No, I got that right. Also with us, we have some staff from planning. We have Katie Wewell, Kat Kemet. We have our clerk, Scott Matthews, and from the Law Department, Jonah Temple. We also have Counselor Pam Wright, who's not on the committee from Ward 3, joining us online. Let's see if I missed anyone. So far, I know we'll have a few more people who will be joining us, and I will introduce them as they come in. The first few items tonight are a request for Class 2 auto. Bless you. Is your microphone on? That was a powerful sneeze. We have a request for Class 2 auto dealer licenses. The first item is shall we do them all together, Mr. Clerk? Yeah, there's no issues with any of them, so I think we'll take them all together, but I'll read the item number and the location. First is number 485-24 for Luxury Motors at 10 Hawthorne Street. Next is number 486-24, Old Time Garage at 1960 Washington Street. Number 487-24, Auction Direct Pre-Owned Inc. at 1545 Washington Street. Number 488-24, Yes Auto Sales Group Inc., DBA Yes Auto Center at 454 Watertown Street. And finally, number 489-24, MAG Retail Holdings, CJ LLC, DBA McGovern Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram at 777 Washington Street. Mr. Clerk, do you want to say anything about these?
Yeah, the only thing is we did check in with ISD, police, and treasury, and there are no outstanding issues.
So I think we can take them all together. If someone would like to make a motion to accept these, Councillor Leary.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? All set. The next two items on our agenda, in a way, are separate docket items, but it's the same project with different addresses and docket numbers. We've been asked to postpone or hold both of these. It's number 476-24, which is a request to allow retaining wall exceeding 4 feet in height at 52 Kingston Road, which is the same thing as number 477-24, request to allow retaining wall exceeding 4 feet in height at 166 Plymouth Road. If there are no objections to holding this item, could we have a motion towards that? Oh, we are actually going to open, oh, yes, sir. We're going to open the public hearing. Would you like to come speak at the microphone as part of the public on this? Could you make sure that that microphone is on at the base?
Okay, it's
Perfect. And could you just give us your name and address,
Andrew
please?
Gordon, 52 Kingston Road, so I'm one of
Yes.
homeowners, and Katie asked me to speak briefly to this, even though it's simply a request for postponement. So I'm here to do that. Is that okay?
Would you like to say a few words then?
Yeah, it's 3 or
Okay.
4 minutes, I think.
Go ahead.
So our house as built in 1987 has 2 tiers, or it has a 2-tier retaining wall. The lower wall is 12 feet, the upper wall's 5.5 or so feet. It's constructed of timbers that were already showing signs of age, would have needed to be reinforced, replaced at some point in the next years. But on June 2023, so about a year and a half ago, a tree fell from 166 Plymouth onto the lower wall and damaged it considerably. The insurance company ruled it a total loss and in need of replacement. The insurance company, with our agreement, engaged an engineer who worked with a surveyor whose plans we've uploaded, and also a contractor that we're still working with, and they came up with a proposed design last May. It took a while. That engineer retired in June. He is no longer licensed, so he cannot provide the needed professional engineer plan. We've recently found a new engineer who we believe will prepare the needed plan, but it took a while to find someone able and willing to do this, and he hasn't started. Simply replacing the lower wall where it stands which I don't think would require a special permit, can't be done without risk to the integrity of the footings of our deck, which are anchored in the soil inside the wall. So what we're proposing, or will propose in a modified form before returning to you, will be a wall of the same height as the current lower wall, but it will encase that existing wall. This mode of repair is necessary for the stability and the integrity of the house. The wall fails, it risks the failure of the deck, which connects integrally to the house.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. I think we get the gist of it. We're glad you have found a new engineer.
Yes.
We're happy to entertain a motion to hold this if you're all set with that.
I did want to mention one more thing. Our neighbor on abutting has raised concern about the existing plan that you have in front of you. So what the engineer will create will be a modified plan.
Okay, yeah, we're not going to be discussing it tonight because we'll hold it, but thank you for a little bit of that background. Councillor Lobovitz. And thank you. Move to hold. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone object? I just would like to welcome Vice Chair Tariq Lucas, who has just joined us in the chamber. So both of those items are on hold. Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for coming to speak. The next item is number 479-24, which is a request to amend special permits number 236-13 and 380-21 to allow construction of a new member center at 383-655 Dedham Street, which is the Charles River Country Club. Is there someone here on behalf of Charles River Country Club who would like to present their petition? Mr. Lee, are you doing that on behalf of Charles River Country Club?
Yes, I am. Thank you. I was not able to unmute, but they allowed me just now. So yes, thank you. May I begin?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So good evening. For the record, Lawrence Lee, Rosenberg, Freeman, and Lee, representing Charles River Country Club. There are a few members of the club with me tonight. Mr. Jim Connors here, Joe Junta, and Mr. Chris Mulhern, who is the architect, and also Dave McLennan, who is part of the team. With your permission, may I share my screen?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so if you all can see that, it's a very simple project, actually. So the club, like many other of the, several of the country clubs in the city, are very old institutions, so they've been around for 100 years. Pretty much everything there is non-conforming uses, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, asking for permission. There are 3 parcels that consist of the Charles River Country Club. What we're talking about here is really the main parcel of land, so it's the largest parcel. We're in an SR1 zoning district. Again, everything is non-conforming. What we're looking to do is to replace the existing cart barn that was built in the early 1980s with a member center, which is a variety of uses, which also consists of a golf cart storage facility on the first floor. We'll go over that. The Conservation Commission actually reviewed this project already, and we have received an order of conditions from them back in July. So they've looked at all the plans and they've approved. Historic, because it's under or fewer than 50 years, we don't need their review. So it's not within their jurisdiction for the cart barn. Just to give you some context, the cart barn is where my cursor is. It's really right in the middle of the property. So it's very, very far away from any of our neighbors. Over the years, we've had a lot of communications with our neighbors, the Gables, that are over here. We've been in touch with them. A member of our team or team members have been in touch with them, and they're completely fine. They're well aware of the project and they're fine with it. I'll give a little bit more detail later. This is just a couple of maps from the Newton Assessor's website, just to give you some context. Again, this is the main parcel of the club. Here and here are the two other parcels of the that make up the country club. And then the zoning map in case you need to see that later on. Photographs of the existing cart barn that will be demolished and replaced. It is quite old, and we're looking to replace it with a new building that will provide other services to the existing members. Another site plan showing the relativity to the relations of the location of the cart barn to our neighbors, to the property lines, to the streets. Very, very far away from many folks, and they probably won't even see it. Here's a close-up of a site plan of a cart barn that will be replaced. This is not any different from what we showed at the Conservation Commission hearing. This is from the architectural plan set showing the proposed member center that will replace the cart barn. Here's a rendering of what it will look like. And elevations along the east and north elevations of the proposed member center. And then feel free to chime in if you have any questions, and we can always go back to these slides. The property, the height of the building is about 41 feet based on the average grade calculations. Again, this is very, very minimal in terms of the comparison to the size of the property, which is quite large. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the site plans between the two buildings. Cart barn is here. We're going to replace it with a member center. These drawings are all within the materials that have been submitted, but I think it's noteworthy that, for example, the front setbacks here is over 800 feet. On the side setbacks and rear setback, you have 1,000 feet and 2,000 feet plus change. Sorry, I went the other direction here. Taking you inside the building now, the first floor, ground floor, will have the golf cart storage and some other uses for the club. And then the first floor will have a multi-purpose area, some storage and an office space. And a top floor is intended to be some activities for the members, golf simulators, training, lounge area, things like that. Just a relation, the cross sections of existing and proposed buildings that are also in your packet in relation to the cart barn alone and then the member center. And that's really the conclusion of our presentation. It's quite straightforward and simple. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We appreciate you sticking around, and Mr. Connors and the team in case there are questions. Let's hear now from the planning department.
Hi, Madam Chair. I know Kat was supposed to present this one. She did let me know she was having technical difficulties, so I can take you through what we have prepared.
Thank you.
Once it's open. Okay. So, as Attorney Lee stated, this is a special permit to allow for the construction of a new member center, and due to its location in the single residence district requires zoning relief. The project is located between Dedham Street and Winchester Street. As you can see, the site is pretty large and, kind of surrounded by residential uses. The zoning relief required is to amend the prior special permits to extend the non-conforming country club use and to determine the appropriate dimensional controls for the proposed member center. When reviewing the request, the council should consider whether the site is an appropriate location for that proposed amendment to the previous council orders, whether the proposed project will adversely impact the neighborhood, whether it will create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians, whether access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved, and lastly, whether the extension of the non-conforming use will be substantially more detrimental than the existing non-conforming uses to the neighborhood. You can see those are the 4 standard criteria and then the non-conforming criteria. And that is all we have. I think Kat Kemet has joined us, so she is able to step in and answer any questions or add to the presentation. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Kat?
No, thanks for that, Katie. Some technical difficulties over here, but I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Ms. Wewell, and thanks for being here, Ms. Kemet. Let's see if any members of the public have any questions or comments on this petition. I don't see any right now. I don't see any in the chamber. I would like, though, to welcome Councillor John Oliver, who's joined us virtually from Ward 1, not a member of the committee, but here to participate or listen in any case. I don't see anyone, so let's take it into the committee. If there are members of the public who have questions or comments, please raise your virtual or literal hand and we will try and hear from you. Are there any comments from the committee? Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. This is not so much about the Park Barn, which looks like a very nice facility, but the club has, as I understand, pretty good relations with the neighborhood. There's been some conversations recently about a very ancient historic use of one of the large hills off Northampton Street for sledding. And I'd like to know if that's available to the public in the wintertime, should we ever have snow again?
I'm not sure how that relates to this petition, but
So
either
it's a
Mr.
question of town and gown, kind of.
I
may say.
understand.
Well,
I'm
okay.
going to send it back to the team, whether that's Mr. Lee or perhaps Mr. Connors, if you would like to address that question from Councillor Farrell. And again, this is in his ward, so I understand why he's asking a question like that.
Well, I would like to address my young daughter loves to sled, so I think that would be a pertinent question that I would like to find out too. But perhaps what we can do is take it offline, Council Farrell, and I can reach out to you and connect you to the members of the club. So I'm sure that they'll look into it for you if that's available.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Councillor Farrell?
No, but if there are none, Chair, I'd move to approve this.
Anything else from the
Do I need
committee?
to close the public hearing first or something?
I'm just making sure no one else wants to speak. I don't see anyone, so I think that's a motion that we're happy to entertain right now. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? No. Could we see whether it's Ms. Kemet or Ms. Wewell, conditions, findings and conditions?
Yes, I can share that right now. Hold on one moment. Okay, right, hopefully everyone can see and hear me here. So for findings, we have one, the site in SR1 is an appropriate location for the project as designed because the proposed construction is set back far into the property with minimal visibility from nearby dwellings and public rights of way. 2, the project will not adversely affect the neighborhood because the improvements will result in a negligible percentage increase in impervious surface due to large size of the site and nature of the use. 3, the project will not create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians because vehicular access to the site will remain the same. Access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved. And the extension of the nonconforming use will not be substantially more detrimental than the existing use is to the neighborhood because the club has operated as a nonconforming use for many years. The work proposed is in keeping with the normal operations of the facility and is unlikely to negatively impact abutters. And the conditions here are pretty standard. We have the referencing conditions for the civil plans and the architectural plans, building permit plans, and certificate of occupancy. This one has a lot that comes after it just by nature of combining the existing special permits and amendments, but the salient ones are really the top ones here.
If I may just make one comment is that if the special permit were to be approved, condition number 6 that got carried over from 1980 pertaining to the cart barn, that will be sort of superseded. So that's the one technical correction or change. Otherwise, everything is fine.
Makes sense. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Great. No other comments then? I think we're ready to entertain the motion
So
by
moved.
Counselor Farrell to approve.
Yes, I move to approve.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lovovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo. Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone. It was a very well-prepared petition and a well-done planning review and memo too. So thank you all.
Thank
The
you.
next item before us is number 423-24, which is a request to allow 3 attached single-family dwellings to waive the required lot coverage, lot area, side and rear setback requirements, parking in the front setback, and a retaining wall exceeding 4 feet in height at 15 Algonquin Road. We have seen this petition before. We've given feedback. They're back again before us tonight. Someone like to come speak on behalf of the petition for 15 Algonquin Road? As he takes his coat off. Come to the microphone, please, and remind us who you are in case there are some people who are not aware. Good timing, Mr. Morris.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Terry Morris, and I'm here representing my client, Mr. Brian Condon, owner of the property at 15 Algonquin. You may recall at the last meeting, the reason why this was held was because of an issue surrounding the lot coverage. Lot coverage being the requirement under attached dwellings, 25%. And as we know, if this were a single or two-family house, it would be a much more generous lot coverage of 30. Nonetheless, we had come in at 29, over 29, close to at 29.5. We've made every effort since then to reduce it below the limitation of 25%. Pleased to report that we have done so. My client here, Brian, will walk through the changes so that you can see how we accomplished that. In short order, we accomplished it largely by shrinking the footprint of the building, as one would expect. As you see here, this is what the front facade of the building looked like before we made the changes. The only change to the front facade, which is particularly important, is that the double windows that you see on the third level have been reduced to single windows as shown on the subsequent slide here. Next slide. This is the site plan, the revised site plan, in which we basically will, maybe we could blow that up, Brian. Okay. In reducing the building, probably the most dramatic way to demonstrate that is by showing you how previous setbacks were increased. Starting at the rear of the site, you'll see that the previous setback was 58.8 feet, is now 72.8. Immediately to the right of that is setback was more than double. Setback of 11.6 was increased to 23.7. Moving on down the southern light line, 17.2 was increased to 20.3. And as we come to the front of the building, you'll see that the one front of the building, which was compliant with the 25-foot requirement, has even been increased to 26.4. Yep. The lot coverage, as one would think, where one would expect, given the reduction in the footprint of the building, has been increased from 56.5% to 60.8%. Next one. Here we see the site, these are the floor plans. Largely, we basically moved the building from the back to the front, shrinking the width of the building to on 3 levels to accomplish that end. Next slide. There's the second and third levels. And the next one. Obviously, one would be interested in knowing how the facade, the elevation may have changed having done this. You can see, Brian can you probably describe it best, if there's any changes.
This remained largely unchanged. The only difference with the back now being about anywhere from, I think, 7 to 12 feet shorter. But the sides have all remained the same, and the front has maintained the same facade with the exception of the top window. That's the side right there. Right there.
So we have the rear elevation of it.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Here's the rear elevation. As Brian indicated, there's been no change to that. The side elevation, of course, because the building has been shrunk by 10 or 11 feet, although the basic elements of the building have not significantly changed. That concludes our presentation. I am, however, aware of the fact that it's come to my attention that some people are concerned about the fact that we reduced the lot coverage to 24.9, which is just a shade under the 25. That my clients and I have had a discussion about the concern that the committee has had about the increase in the number of requests for consistency rulings over plans that have not been quite built according to as they were approved. So my client is also not only the owner of the property, but is the licensed construction supervisor who will be supervising the construction and be responsible for making sure that the building is plotted out and constructed to meet the requirement that we have now established. So I wanted to say that because I understand there was a concern. I want to put that concern at rest. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. We appreciate you addressing some of the concerns and suggestions that were brought before you previously. Planning, would you like to add anything to what the petitioners have presented?
I have several slides if you'd like to go through the updated relief and the context.
Thank you. Yes.
Sure. So I'll be brief here. This is 15 Algonquin Road, still, I think, fresh in many people's minds. But the relief here is largely the same. This is the neighborhood. The relief here is to allow single-family attached dwelling, reduced lot area, reduced side setback, rear setback, parking in the front setback, parking within 20 feet of the front lot line, and the retaining walls exceeding 4 feet in height. The issue of lot coverage has been addressed with the reduction. We did note that in the memo that it is pretty close, but it sounds like that is something that the petitioner will be taking in mind as they move forward. And this was reviewed by engineering, who noted no concerns with the retaining walls on the site. So something of an update on that front. And in terms of the criteria to consider, the site is an appropriate location for the proposed single-family dwellings as designed. The attached single-family dwellings will not adversely affect the neighborhood. The dwellings will not create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. Access to the site is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved. Literal compliance with the parking requirements is impractical due to the nature of the use or the location, size, frontage, depth, shape, or grade of the lot. And we also have here the criteria for the retaining walls. So that includes the lot presents challenging topography, which limits the use of the property such that it could not be improved without the implementation of retaining walls over 4 feet. The retaining walls over 4 feet will not adversely impact adjacent properties. And the retaining walls over 4 feet is the minimum structure necessary to allow the subject property to be reasonably utilized. And that is all.
Thank you, Ms. Kemet, for adding that for us. Are there any members of the public who still have questions or comments on this petition while the public hearing is open and would like to speak? Don't see anyone in the chamber. I don't see anyone in the public. Let's take it to the committee. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Morris, thank you and your client for bringing the lot coverage under 25%. It's probably going to be a reoccurring theme just going forward for future projects, not related to your client, but lot coverage is one of the things that I'm very strict on. But you brought it down to 24.9, that conforms. You're good on that front, and you addressed it earlier in your comments regarding the lot coverage, is that you're just under. And if during construction you go over that, you're going to require a consistency ruling or a potential amendment to the special permit. You are aware of that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. And I just want to verify one other thing, just because I've seen many special permit projects come through this committee where one petitioner gets a special permit and then they sell it to another developer and then they develop the site. And I just want to be clear, it is your intention to build build the 3-family, single-family attached as per the plans tonight and what's on paper?
Yes, sir.
You are, okay, good. Yeah, that's my only comments I want to say. It's just the lot coverage, thank you, and just build per the plans, and I'm all set, thank you.
Councillor Block, then Laredo, then Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question perhaps directed to planning. The FAR worksheet, I'm wondering if you could just take a look at this. I don't know if this perhaps wasn't updated, but the FAR is 0.59. Is that the right calculation for this? This is 0.59 with the allowable FAR of 0.48.
Mr. Morris has his
Yes, we
hand up, and
I
if
can address that.
Oh, okay, sure.
With the previous design, none of the 3rd floor level counted towards FAR. The massing of the building has not increased at all, but with the shrinking of the footprint, that caused the ratio of floor area of 5 feet and above to basically go away, and as a result, the 3rd floor space is now included. That increased the FAR from what it was previously to 0.65. But I would remind the councilor that FAR is not a factor in attached dwelling.
So noted. I'm wondering if planning has any reflections on this calculation.
Ms. Kemet, did you have anything to add to this question?
I do not. This is not something that requires relief. So we generally trust that the architect and the professionals that have calculated it are correct. We would double check it if it was something that needed relief, but in this case, it is not.
Thank you very much. That's it.
That's it. All set, Counselor Block. Counselor Laredo, President Laredo.
So I'm ready to move this item unless there's further questions by my colleagues. I do have one question, but want to see if anyone else wants to speak first.
We'll come back to you. Counselor Farrell has his hand up too. Counselor Farrell.
Thank you. And this is not under the notion of trying to protect the interests of the neighborhood. Everything around this property is very light and delicate. And then I don't mean to be a critic of your design, but this seems to be a very dark presence on the street. And it's very different. And I'm just curious about why you've chosen to make it so dark.
Yeah, we haven't settled entirely on the color, but we did try to use a mix of like a dark stucco with a contrast of a lighter natural wood. So look at the facade, there's composite type material that's actually made from recycled rice hulls called acre siding that will have a natural wood effect. And then just the outline of the house and the sides were a stucco, darker color. But again, that color is not 100% set in stone.
It's mostly the large, I don't know what you call them, fascia boards on the front.
Yeah.
They look very dark.
Counselor Farrell, can you speak into the microphone
Sorry,
too?
it's
That way we
mostly
can all hear you.
the darkness of those very heavy, large fascia boards, which, again, I'm not an architect, but it just, everything in that neighborhood, particularly the house next to you, is very delicate and light and white and just curious.
Yeah, no, we can certainly consider lightening that up a little bit.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else, Counselor Farrell?
Thank you, Chair.
Want to be sure. President Laredo, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first of all, thank you for reducing the lot coverage. I think, as Councilor Lucas said, that was helpful and appreciated. Quick question for planning. In your memo, you referenced that the renderings were not quite complete and that we should rely on the plans for the grade change here. Could you just remind us what the grade change is here? So we're all on the same page about that?
Would you like me to bring up the site plan, or it varies depending on the part of the property?
I'm sorry, I missed that. I'm sorry.
There's a grade change of several feet, particularly towards the rear of the site.
So it's an increase of 4 feet from what it was previously?
Depending on the section of the site, yes, it does change as much as 4 feet.
In the rear of the property, essentially, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we're measuring from the original grade when we're figuring out the height of the building?
I don't think that is accurate, Counselor Laredo, because the new height ordinance that will take into account the original grade does not go into effect until January 1st. If this project is approved tonight, it would then be approved at the next council meeting with this month. So it would effectively protect them from the new height regulations and kind of lock in their plans and the current ordinance in place.
Fair enough. I just want to understand what we're approving. So remind me, the height of the building in the rear using the new grading, is that 36 feet or is it less? Forgive me for not having that information in front of me.
So it's taking into account the proposed average grade with the additional fill as it's measured under the current ordinance.
So with the new fill in there, how high is the height of the building in the rear?
I'm not sure we have that measurement because we calculate it from the average grade around the perimeter of the building. So per zoning, it's 35.6 feet. I can try to take a look So the proposed grade at the rear is around a 209 elevation. And the average grade is also at 209, so it will appear as 35.6, if that helps answer your question.
Look, I'm not as concerned about it here because this is, I know the property well. It's a downward slope from the neighbor's property. I don't think a grade change is going to create a lot of issues. I just want to I want to be very clear what we're approving here. So am I right, Attorney Morris, that you're increasing the grade in a portion of the property to level it off essentially? I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, as you pointed out, Counselor, there's a severe drop going back and we basically level it off
All
to
right.
create.
I'm fine with that. I appreciate the clarification. Obviously, going forward, we're going to be looking at original grades, not fill. But I'm happy, Madam Chair, to move to close the public hearing and then move approval.
Thank you, Counselor Laredo. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No. Let's take a look at, and we do have a motion to approve. Let's take a look at the findings and conditions. Planning, back to you.
This is Kat again. So for findings, we have one, the site is an appropriate location for the proposed single-family attached dwellings because it is a residential use and the proposed design maintains the residential character of surrounding buildings. 2, the proposed dwellings as designed will not adversely affect the neighborhood because the project exceeds the required lot area per unit and minimum open space required, and new plantings are proposed. 3, the project will not create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians because there will be adequate parking provided on the site. 4, access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved. 5, literal compliance with the parking requirements is impractical due to the topography of the site and shape of the lot. Relocating the stalls outside of the setbacks and front lot line would require an increase in paving and impervious ground cover, which is not in the public interest. 6, the lot presents challenging topography, which limits the use of the property because the site is sloped, and portions of the site could not be improved without constructing a system of retaining walls over 4 feet in height. 7, the proposed system of retaining walls over 4 feet will not adversely impact adjacent property, the neighborhood, or the public because the existing site has retaining walls of comparable height, and it is located in a neighborhood that already features several retaining walls nearby. And 8, the proposed system of retaining walls over 4 feet is the minimum structure necessary to allow the property to be reasonably utilized because the site as it exists is sloped. The retaining walls will assist in soil stabilization given the grades of this and the adjacent properties. And for conditions, we have our standard reference conditions, an operations and management plan, maintenance plan, pest and rodent activity, a construction management plan, and our building permit and occupancy conditions. And the landscaping must be consistent with what is approved. And that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Kemet. We have a motion before us. If we don't have any more comments within the committee, let's take a vote.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Counselor Farrow,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lovovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much. Wish you all a very happy holidays.
Thank you both. Our final special permit request for the night is number 478-24, which is a request to allow 3 single-family attached dwellings in 2 buildings to waive certain dimensional requirements and 1 parking stall at 237-239 Langley Road. Is the petitioner here to present what you want to do? Mr. Acevedo or someone else?
Good evening. My name is Nader Acevedo. I am the owner of 237, 239 Langley Road. My wife and I.
Where do you live? What's your address?
Excuse me?
And what is your address? Where do you live?
237,
Well, you live in this building right now,
Yes.
and you're the owner. Perfect, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So we bought the house over 50 years ago. We are two senior citizens in the mid 80s. About a year ago, we raised 3 kids in the house, 2 sons and a daughter. They gone from the house. About a year ago, we came before the building department to try to get a permission to build a small unit. Right now, we have a 3,200 square feet of space that we live in it, and 33 stairs that we have to go up and down. So we filed for a permit to build a small unit, 1,500 square feet of space. Thank you, Julio.
Let me understand what you're saying. The new unit that you're trying to build in the back to replace the garage is an additional 1,300 square feet of space, 1 floor, because that's what you were wanting? Did I understand that correctly?
No, what he said, my name is Lorenzo Quinones. I'm the project manager and the builder. What he's saying is that because of the situation in his unit, okay, because it's all stairs and everything else, he wanted to build an adjacent building, okay, which is a townhouse, a small townhouse of 1,500 square feet. It's got a 1-car garage, so he can come in with the groceries and get into his garage and then walk into his unit without too much hassle. Because of, he's old and his wife is old and they can't maneuver the stairs anymore. And
Isn't it a 2-story unit?
it's a 2-story unit, yes.
So they still have stairs?
Only a few steps. And it's not like now they have, about 37 to 40 steps to get up to where they want to go.
Fewer stairs in the new unit. They're going to move from the front building, which has many stairs, to the rear unit that they're proposing, which has fewer stairs.
Just a few stairs. I mean, as a matter of
Wanted to understand what he was saying.
Right.
Thank you.
And it has a 1-car garage where they can drive in, with the groceries. They don't have to hassle with the weather and everything else and be inside the unit. So this was the idea of proposing to build this, but there is on the site a 2-car garage because it's falling apart. It's on the vicinity of about 400 square feet, the garage itself. And that would be raised, that would be demolished, and the new unit would take that place. It would only occupy about 300 square feet more than the footprint of the existing garage. And it would be very convenient for them and, allow them to stay in Newton.
So they are going to move from the front house currently to the rear unit and turn the front house into 2 units, which other people will live in. Is that the plan?
To turn the front house into 2 units. No, remember the front house has 1 unit in the first floor and then 1 2-story unit on the second floor. So they would have to actually rent the 2 units, the second unit on the second floor and leave this one, okay, which is more convenient for them.
Correct. Got it.
That's
I do
the
anyway.
whole scope.
Anything else that you would like to add to your presentation of what you're trying to do?
Well, it's gonna, be a very attractive building because it would actually have the same architecture as the existing unit. Okay, it would have planting and it would have driveway, and everything would be 100% better than what it is right now.
Do you have any of that you'd like to show us tonight on the screen? Did you bring visuals for us to look at on the screen or not?
No, but I mean, I'm sure that,
They've been submitted. I'm asking because sometimes people, especially who are watching from the audience or home, haven't seen that stuff. So sometimes a petitioner will bring visual presentations, but we have received plans in the mail. I just didn't know if, I wanted to give you the opportunity to present something on the screen if you had it, but no. Okay, thank you. Planning, would you like to speak to this project?
Yes, I have a few brief slides.
They probably have some pictures.
This is Kat Kemick again, Senior Planner. This is petition 478-24 at 237-239 Langley Road. It is a special permit to allow 3 single-family attached dwellings in 2 buildings to waive certain dimensional requirements and 1 parking stall. So this is located on Langley Road in Newton Center. It's a primarily residential neighborhood with a nonprofit educational use that is in a butter. The zoning relief here includes relief to allow the single family attached use, required lot area, required frontage, required lot area per unit, a reduction in the minimum side setback and rear setback to reduce the minimum required open space, a waiver of 1 parking stall to reduce the minimum parking stall depth, and to allow a driveway within 10 feet of a side lot line and parking within 20 feet of a side lot line and parking within the side setback. When reviewing this request, the council should consider if the site is an appropriate location for the proposed single-family dwellings as designed, if the dwellings as designed will not adversely affect the neighborhood, if they will not create a nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians, if access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and number of vehicles involved, and that literal compliance with the parking requirements is impractical due to the nature of the use or the location, size, frontage, depth, shape, or grade of the lot, or that an exception would be in the public interest. In this case, planning is not concerned with the proposed use or the parking waiver. We do recommend reducing paving on the site and/or permeable paving. Wanted to note that the proposed site plan is missing some details that planning has asked for and is still waiting on, including the full topographic information for the proposed site plan. And there is a retaining wall on the site that is not reflected in the existing or proposed plans that we would really need to see on the plans. And we're requesting that the petitioner provide that, and we're recommending that engineering review it, but only once we have those final site plans with all of that information to make sure that that retaining wall is accurately captured. Thank you.
may I say something?
Ms. Kemet, yes, sir, go ahead again.
The proposed plan that she requested was actually prepared and submitted to her. It's on the portal.
It was only what?
It was submitted to her on, and we have copies of it, of her request for the updated SP1 drawing.
Ms. Kemet, would you like to explain in more detail what it was you're suggesting is missing from that?
Yes, and I have left a voicemail and also written out what is missing from the plan. It does not have the complete topographic information, and there's a retaining wall on the site that is not on the plan. So those should be added to the plan.
Okay, they were added to it. You know, if you look for it, I'm sure.
Sir, when did you submit the updated one with the complete topographical grade showing to the edge of the site and that reflects the existing retaining wall? When did you submit that plan? Just so that we can check, we have received it. I didn't see it either.
Madam Chair, I'm showing the last plan was uploaded on December 4th. I have that plan open. I'm happy to share it. Kat is correct that there is no retaining wall shown on this site. I mean, we're happy to continue having offline conversations with the applicant. We wanted the committee to be be aware of what we were looking for and in our memo.
The retaining wall is shown with the elevation of 244 at the top of the wall. And it's 24 inches high.
If you can speak directly into the microphone, it will help us. Ms. Wewell, why don't you put up the plan that you've received so they can confirm that this is the most recent one that they have uploaded?
So I've just shared, this is the plan that was uploaded on December 4th.
There are no grade lines shown on this plan. There are some, but you're saying not complete and not thorough and not the entire site? Sir, is this the plan that you think is the most recent one that you have submitted?
Yes, it is. You can say, see the retaining wall in the back where it shows, retaining wall to remain and top elevation 244. And you see all the, contour grading of the whole site.
I'm not myself on my little screen seeing a note that says retaining wall to remain. Could somebody
I can see it and it's pointing to it on the right in the blank space. I don't think this is adequate. I don't think we could send this down to engineering for their full review, and we certainly don't want to waste their time in a review. So I think we'll need to continue to work with the applicant on this.
There's also an existing retaining wall around here on the site, and that is not shown on the existing or proposed plan, what the plan is for that wall.
I would assume that a surveyor would show on the existing conditions plan the existing retaining wall, and that the retaining wall would be noted more thoroughly that you're referring to that will be retained. What I'm hearing from planning is there's still some coordination and work to be done for gathering full information that they need to proceed. But I appreciate you saying that you had submitted a more revised version. If we're all set with your presentation and planning for now, I'd like to go on and see if there are any members of the public who would like to speak, and then bring it into the committee for questions. Are you a member of the public who would like to speak? Great, come to the microphone, identify yourself, give us your name and address and your comments.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Gould. I live at 287 Langley Road, Unit 5, which is the terraces. I am an immediate abutter to 237 and 239 Langley Road. I am also a member of the Board of Governors of the terraces. So I'm here tonight representing the interests of the terraces community. We had reached out to Mr. Acevedo and his developer and met with them on Monday to discuss a number of potential issues that we had as the community at the terraces, including tree removal and landscaping, as well as stormwater management from this building, which is relatively going to be high up on the land. It was a very profitable meeting with Mr. Acevedo. We discussed a number of the issues, but the one issue that is particularly concerning to us at the terraces is the water pump system. It is a large pump station that is located approximately 30 feet from Mr. Acevedo's driveway. The pump station provides all the water to not only the 48 units at the terraces, but also to the Chan property, which was the former Andover Newton Theologic Seminary. In the event that there was ever a disruption of the water supply or a disruption at the pump station, it would be massively chaotic to huge numbers of residents. We raised that because the water pump station is on the land owned by the Chan family, but the city of Newton has a 99-year easement to put the water pumping station on it. So the water pumping station is there. The problem is that the pumping station is completely unprotected in any way. It's totally accessible from all four grounds, front, back, and forward. It is completely unprotected. And our concern at the terraces is that the driveway that is going to be used for construction vehicles and also is going to be torn up leaves the water pumping station completely unprotected to any construction issues or accidents. In particular, the Acevedos are planning to pull up this driveway and replace it with a new driveway. We are very concerned with protection of the water pumping station because now there is no protection whatsoever. So we would ask the city to look further into this issue to see if the water pumping station can be or should be protected. A number of people in our community have raised these concerns with the Board of Governors, and I'm here to address them here tonight. But we are all very concerned about the lack of protection in maintaining the integrity of the water pumping station.
Thank you, Mr. Gold.
Thank you.
Do I understand you to say that as of yesterday, you did have meetings with,
Monday.
which was yesterday?
Yes, yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Recent, thank you very much for coming. Mary Lee Belville.
Mary Lee Belleville, 136 Warren Street. I'm completely understanding and empathetic to the petitioner's desire to build an additional housing unit on their property that better meets their needs. And that seems very much aligned with the city's goal of additional housing, accessory housing units, dwelling units, et cetera. I'm a little confused, I believe, but it wasn't clear that in addition to that, the plan is to demolish the existing house and build 2 additional units. I see head shaking. Is that not the plan? Is the plan to, no. So they're going to maintain the houses that are there?
Mr. Acevedo, you could come to the microphone to clarify this. It was my understanding that they are planning to maintain the
Oh,
existing
great.
house and add the additional 3rd detached unit to the rear. Is that correct?
No.
No.
The existing house is going to remain.
Yes.
The only thing that's going to be torn down is the existing garage.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
The new unit will take the place of the garage.
I think that's
Yep.
what I said, but thank you. Okay, you're all set, Ms. Belville?
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Okay, Tatiana.
Yes, good evening, Tatiana Meschede, 221 Langley Road, here with my husband, Daniel Krasser. So we live down the road a few houses from Mr. Acevedo, and we are in full support of this additional unit. We think it's a unit of a great size. It's a smaller unit of which we don't see many in Newton being built, and it's definitely falls under adding more housing opportunities within the city limits. So we are full support. We have not seen any of the plans. We talked with Mr. Acevedo briefly today. So it was nice to see a little bit of, what is planned or hear about it, but we have not seen what the final plan is. But the size of the unit is something that we definitely support.
Thank you very much.
Yes, this is
Sure,
Dan
go
Cressy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for the Department of Public Works to think if there's any danger to that pump. But I don't think there are any pipes under this property, and I can't imagine how there would be any issues with that, but I'm not an expert on that. But it's definitely suitable for the site to be adding you know, the small 1,500 square foot space.
Thank you.
I want to, say something regarding the booster pump station. Okay, we know of its existence. We know the easement that is involved, and we are quite a ways, and we have no construction whatsoever near it. Okay, I know the concern is about paving. If you get your driveway paved, they don't use a big, huge trucks or anything like that. Okay, they normally use a small six-wheeler, and we can actually make sure that no heavy trucking goes through there and keep it under watch. Okay, we are aware of the plant, and we'll make sure that nothing happens to it.
Thank you. I will call on you to come back if we need you again, but thank you for being available. Any other public questions or comments? I don't see any. We'll take it into the committee. Councilor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we're clearly not ready to vote on this tonight. I will just express my concern that a public meeting with the neighbors was held not early in the process as we have strongly encouraged the planning department to convey to the developers, and I don't know if that was conveyed here or not, but rather literally 24 hours before they come here, which does not allow any time to tweak or change or address concerns of the neighbors before it comes here. I don't know anything about this, the water supply issue. Not my area of expertise. It strikes me as a very legitimate concern, but it also strikes me as a concern that should have been fully resolved before it came here. And I'm frankly just disappointed that it was not. I am also seeing a significant amount of reductions for, and I'm gonna get this right. Significant amount of reduction in the open space minimum from currently 61% required 50% down to 37.8%. An increase in the lot area per unit is below the 4,000. I just think that these are issues that frankly should have been worked out more before this came here. I understand the desire of the petitioner to add another unit. I don't think that's at all necessarily inappropriate, but I would hope in doing so, we guide the petitioners as much as possible to minimize the effects of that. I'm also troubled by the fact that the plans that have been given to the planning department, at least in the planning department's view, are not complete. And that's not fair to the planning department. They need complete materials on which to draw their analyses and conclusions. So I guess, Madam Chair, I would not have heard this petition tonight, quite honestly. And I would hope in the future that when petitions are not ready, that we don't hear them because they take time of the petitioner, they take our time, they take the public's time. And I think actually when the work is done in advance and then comes before us, this process goes far more smoothly and far more quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, President Laredo. I think that if we are going to hold this, there are things we'd like to highlight that will need to be clarified and submitted, including perhaps another meeting. I understand that you met with some people from the terraces on Monday. Tatiana and Dan mentioned that they have not met with you. There might be other neighbors that you might want to involve in this who have not seen the plans and would like to hear about it. But thank you, Councilor Laredo, for your comments. We're keeping this in committee for a little bit. Counselor Lobovitz, you're next.
So I completely agree with Councilor Rado on his comments. I just wanted to add one possible suggestion. I know that there's, good intent in terms of protecting the pump station on the part of the petitioner, but I would wonder if they would consider or we should require some physical barrier to actually prevent any machinery from intruding on that, even near the pump. And I think that's certainly possible, just to be sure that nothing happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Lobovitz. Next, we have Counselor Block and then Counselor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the site for either the petitioner or the planning department. I'm looking at the site plan now, and it looks like the driveway is not totally contained on the site, but crosses over into the abutter's site. Is there an easement that justifies that? Did somebody sort of verify that?
That was mentioned in our planning department memo. Planning, would you like to explain it better? It looked to me like there's an easement that currently exists that they're planning to maintain that starts in the street and leads to their private driveway. Could you explain that more clearly to us?
I believe that is the case. I don't really have any additional information about the easement other than that.
Just wanted to confirm that was the case. Perhaps more substantively, the parking plan for this site is interesting. Aside from the space in the garage that would serve that's part of the new structure that would replace the garage, the other 4 spaces are, shall we say, a little haphazard on this property. And I'm wondering what thought was given into the parking spaces. There are 2 immediately almost abutting the new structure that look like they're really tight, really crammed in. And the other 2 spaces are alongside the existing building, perpendicular to the existing building. And since we're not going to vote on this tonight, we will vote to hold this tonight. I think that the parking plan should be thought through some more to see if a kind of more, I don't know, aesthetically attractive parking plan can be developed for this site. I hope so, because I agree with various comments that this is a perfectly reasonable proposal for the current owner to want, and we're not trying to obstruct that. But this is a highly constrained site on the, given the property lines. So that's it, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Block. I think, I'm getting the sense too that we will be holding it, but I think it's important for us to note the things for the petitioner to pay attention to for when they come back. So I appreciate you mentioning the parking. I usually save my comments to the end, but while we're on parking, I'll say that some of the parking stall dimensions are substandard size, and that is something that I always have difficulty with, especially when they're angled at an askew angle. It's hard to get in and out, and in those cases, more than in many others, having a full-size dimensions of a parking stall, I think, is really important. Councillor Downs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the comments on parking. I have 2 comments, and one is that for myself, I would be happy to see the petitioner come back with a request for less parking on the site. You are fairly near Newton Center. There is plenty of public transit there. Would be a better use of the site and would deal with the impervious surface issues. And the second just has to do with plant choices. I don't usually weigh in on this, but I noticed a number of Bartlett pears on the landscape plans. Bartlett pears are no longer allowed to be purchased in Massachusetts because they're invasive. So I think you will want to look at a different plant, a different tree to go in there. And that'll do it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Now I don't have to mention the Bartlett pears. Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. So my comments tonight are going to be about water and stormwater and water coming off of the site. But before I go into that, I am sympathetic to the petitioner who wants to build another dwelling unit with fewer stairs, smaller unit garage within the footprint of the new house. I am sympathetic to that. But I'm asking if planning can bring up the site plan and put it up on the screen. I just want to go over something that I want everyone to be able to see it. Yeah, thank you. So where the existing garage is, it's at 241 feet. I think you call that feet. But in the front of the site, it drops down to 234. So it drops approximately 7 feet in height, or in grade change, excuse me. That's a natural grade change. Water is going to come off of that driveway and onto the street. So I'm just wondering, is there going to be any storm drain or grate on site to prevent the water from going out into the street? Is that something that engineering has reviewed? Asking the planning.
Engineering has not reviewed this yet, but in the memo, I did recommend it because I think it would provide some useful insight into the grading on the site, any potential stormwater issues, and we can flag the pumping station as something for engineering to opine on as well, if they have any insight on that.
Okay, thank you. So I hope they do weigh in on this before we vote on this. If they could get a memo to us for the next public hearing, that would be much appreciated. Oh, you took the big screen down, sorry.
Councillor Lucas, while you're on that, before you move to next, it's actually a 12-foot grade change altogether from the front to the back of the site, which is a significant grade change. So
Okay.
we
I
would
see.
all appreciate engineering to take a look at the grading and drainage plan for
Yes,
this.
thank you. The other thing is, so the front of the driveway is technically not on the petitioner's property. So I was just wondering, are they allowed to install a drain in that stripe section near the roadway? It's not their property, so I'm just a little confused on this. Like, are they allowed to do it? Who owns that property, or who would be responsible for doing that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We can certainly follow up with engineering. If the applicant does have sort of any rights to that land, perhaps something could be worked out. But as with, any other projects subject to the stormwater ordinance, they will have to design a system subject to the approval of engineering. But I think it is wise to have engineering look at it before any approval.
Yep. The other thing, two other things I'm gonna note related to this is I'm gonna recommend that we use permeable pavers. The petitioner said that they are going to replace the entire driveway. If they're gonna replace it, probably to include that in that stormwater management plan. And then the other thing is that it says in a planning memo, they're going to increase the driveway width, but keep the curb cut. Just wondering if it's at all possible where they could make that driveway narrower narrower, just to keep, and more open space, less pavement, less permeable pavers. So if they could try to come up with a different plan to narrow the driveway width. And with respect to parking, I think 5 parking stalls is fine. It's 3 units. Two of the units would have 4 stalls, and the additional dwelling unit would have that last stall. So 5 parking stalls for 3 units is fine for me. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Is it your suggestion that all of the paving that they're going to replace be permeable versus impervious? Because I believe I read that it was going to be impervious. Are you suggesting all of it, or consideration of use of more permeable, or exactly what do you want them to think about?
The parts of the driveway that are going to be replaced. They said they're going to put in a new driveway. If they're going to put in a new driveway, that should be permeable pavers, just because of the 12-foot change in grade from the rear to the front of the property.
Just wanted to have it go on
Yeah.
the record for them.
Yep, that's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell, and then Councillor Leary.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps repeating will reinforce a couple of these notions. One is when Councilman Block and I visited the other day, the very first thing looking at this plan was that entryway and who does it belong to? Who owns that property? The very second thing that's noticeable is this water contraption that is on a hill. And if that's city owned, we really need to do something about that. I would be very concerned about the terraces if I were in their position about that, with any kind of construction around it. The third thing is, it seems to me that to do what is proposed here, which is a great idea, but this entire property, as we've all spoken, is elevated, and there are going to be some serious cuts into the land where these parking places are. If they're going to be level at all to the rest of the parking area, I think there are going to be a lot of walls that we don't see here to make this work. And I stand to be corrected on that, but it is all elevated property. The land slopes right down to the existing driveway. But that water project really needs some looking into. And I don't know who's responsible for that. It should at the very least be shown on this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. I think that that's part of what planning was saying was not fully shown on the plans, because I agree with you that there's going to be more grading required, particularly for those upper parking spots than I could see on the plan. So thank you for highlighting that. Councillor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in agreement with the comments this evening, at least with most of them. I just wanted to be clear that the concern about the terraces and the water pump station and the concerns about protections, I certainly would want to get more information on that from engineering because, you know, this is the first I'm hearing about it. I didn't see any information about it anywhere. So I think that's something the city should definitely address, and I'd like to have that information for the next time this comes before us. I'm in agreement to the concern about the open space and one way to address that, as Councillor Downs said, would be to reduce some of the parking. That could be an option. It is in Newton Center, very close to public transit, and it's walkable. More permeable pavers. I agree with my colleague, Councillor Lucas, about that. As options that they could come back with for this. I am always in support of folks who need to create an additional unit and are looking to age in place. I think that's a great idea. I just think this project lacks a lot of detail that we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leary. Any other last questions or comments or suggestions from the committee or other councillors? Hopefully you've been paying good attention and taking notes on the things to think about before you're going to come back to us. Do we have a motion? This is in Ward 6. Councillor Lobovitz, do you want to make a motion to this?
I move to hold. Thank you.
And we'll keep the public hearing open. All in favor of holding? say aye. Aye. Any in opposition? Great. I think we'll see you again. You've got some things to work on and to clarify before you come back. Okay, our last item for tonight is a request for a discussion. This is going to be a committee discussion. It's not a public hearing. It's item number 333-24, which is a request for a discussion considering the historical importance during the special permit process. Councillor Block, do you want to say a few words about why you propose this? And then we'll hear from some other people with perspectives on it.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss a kind of policy question. The special permit granting authority that we serve in the zoning ordinance describes what determinations we have to make. And determination number 2 under 7.3.3C is that the city council shall not approve any application unless it finds in its judgment, ... that the use as developed and operated will not adversely affect the neighborhood. So when I think about this responsibility, which I do every time there is a motion in front of us, one of the things that I've asked myself is, if a building has a historic nature, how does that influence how we think about this question, this determination? And it seemed to me that just on its face, that we would want to have some information about the historic nature of a building, which we're more than capable of reading, usually from the Historic Commission. But I gather that's not been the practice of the Land Use Committee over the years. And I'm a little puzzled why it shouldn't be. Which is why I docketed this item. So that's what brought me to this point, and I've mentioned it to a number of colleagues, and they've co-docketed, and I look forward to the conversation on this topic.
Thank you for.
I guess just one other point. I have had discussions with Jonah Temple and legal about this, and I'm sure he'll present his perspectives on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I too, like you, have tried to keep an open mind to how does historic importance filter into any of our decisions here. And I've also talked with planning and law and members of boards and commissions who will be here tonight to talk about it and within the committee. So we're sort of followed similar paths on this. Let's say first, I would like to welcome to the microphone. I see we have the commissioner of the Newton Historical, are you the chair, the president, something like that, the Newton Historical Commission, Doug Cornelius. He is at the microphone in the chamber. We also have on Zoom, who I'd like to welcome, I'll recognize them next, the co-chairs of the Planning and Development Board. And why they're here is that their board actually has a very specific, perhaps limited charge towards historic preservation. That's Amy Dane and Kevin McCormick, and we'll also hear from planning and law. But welcome to Doug Cornelius first.
Hi, thank you. I'm Doug Cornelius. I'm currently the chair of the Newton Historical Commission. I've been on the commission about 7 years now, about half that time serving as the chair. I'm a lawyer by training. During law school, I was also pursuing a master's in historic preservation. Got a great job offer before I could finish the degree. So I think I'm here serving out the degree now. The Historical Commission has 2 main tools to advance its mission for the preservation, promotion, and development of the historical and archaeological assets of the city. For the most exceptional properties, it's the landmark ordinance, and this gives us a powerful tool on the preservation, similar to the powers that the local historic district commissions have over development and changes. The vast majority of our work is through the demolition delay ordinance. This gives the commission potential jurisdiction over any property more than 50 years old. The demolition delay ordinance was reviewed by the city council a few years ago. I spent many hours with the chair, members of the legal department, and other city councilors going through the ordinance, looking for potential changes. The balance of the discussion was really around the scope, and largely we decided to keep in place the 50-year limit for jurisdiction. When we review any property over more than 50 years old, the judgment is whether it's preferably preserved, and if so, we impose a 1-year demolition delay. I believe the city council found this to be the right balance to deter demolition in the city. Applicants can seek a waiver from that 1-year delay for partial demolition. So that is a renovation or an addition. We can review the plans that same night. For a total demolition application, applicants got to wait at least 4 months before they come back for that waiver. For those projects we've approved, I would hope the city council would take into account the historic commission's review when adjudicating a special permit. We generally feel we've achieved our goals when approving a waiver of the demolition delay. A subsequent denial of a special permit for a property after our approval is likely to trigger a wholesale reworking of the project, likely beyond our 12-month delay, and increases the likelihood that we'd end up losing a historic asset. I'm here for more questions. I'm here to hand over to other folks as well too.
Thank you, Doug. I'll just say in my experience, we really rely on the Newton Historical Commission. Those people have qualifications to assess and review and analyze historic importance, whereas we city councilors do not. So we do, as you mentioned before, I think we always listen to what they said. They usually get the first shot at it. As Mr. Cornelius said, that makes sense to start with historical before it comes to the city council. But I know I and most councilors very much respect and look forward to and need the input of the Historical Commission when we're considering anything like that. Amy Dane and Kevin McCormick, would you like to speak about the role that the Planning and Development Board has? I think specifically you're quite narrowly focused on landmark properties, but let us know, tell us what it is you folks do and look at when you've got a historic property before you.
Thank you, Chair. Item Gold. This is Kevin McCormick. I'm the Chair of the Planning and Development Board. Our role is we rely on the Historical Commission to determine whether a building is historical or not. And our role, I'm going to read from the ordinance. It's very specific to say we make a recommendation which evaluates the relationship of the proposed designation to the city's adopted policy and plans. So we look at the comprehensive plan and things like that to determine if landmarking this building, how it's going to affect city's plans and that. It's very limited. We don't at all look at whether the building itself is historical or not. So it's a very, it's that we determine, that we defer to the Historical Commission that has the ability and the knowledge to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Ms. Dane, did you want to add anything? Perhaps not.
No, I think that Kevin mostly covered it. The one other thought I had is that I think that it's appropriate in thinking about planning for long-term opportunities for adding housing to a municipality to think about historic nature of buildings as you decide what districts and areas and parcels to include for rezoning and for denser zoning. So I think that in the recent rezoning that the city undertook for the village centers, that was something that the city council's zoning and planning committee led more than the planning board. But I think that in the work that I've done through my day job looking at zoning policy, I think that it can be appropriate to think about, like, you might not, there may be buildings that aren't landmarked historic, but you think are like historic gems for the city that you may not choose to zone for 6 stories as of right, that might be like incentivizing redevelopment, and to think about which buildings really aren't in need of preservation where you would zone for 6 stories. I think that it's been hard across the region where municipalities haven't acted in good faith to zone for more housing and have used a lot of the regulatory tools to prevent housing development. And one of those tools being historic preservation, and that gets thrown in as a way to prevent housing development. So I've been wanting for all municipalities in the state to address the housing shortage that we have and to engage in good faith, thinking about what areas are most appropriate for us to see more housing development and to zone proactively. And I've been very happy that the city undertook the rezoning to come into compliance with MBTA community zoning law. But I think that within that framework, while we engage in good faith to allow more housing, promote more housing development, to think about historic buildings is great. I'm very much for and in support of historic preservation and using the tools of zoning to think about both areas we want to develop and then areas we want to preserve. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Ms. Dane. I'm going to segue to the planning and law departments, but from what I understand, our criteria are laid out for us. The special permit criteria are laid out in our ordinance, and it would require a change to the ordinance to specifically add in historic significance or importance or preservation. But as I read it, we are not precluded at looking at that, and we sometimes do when it seems appropriate, but I think maybe planning and law may touch on that. Let's start with planning. Is somebody from the planning department want to give us a little bit of your perspective on this topic?
I can speak to a little bit. We do have 2 incredible preservation planners on staff, not here tonight, but I'm sure they would be happy to talk about their work with any of the counselors. I think planning would largely defer to the chair of NHC, Doug Cornelius, on, how the process works and what they take into account. We don't current planning or the team you see most frequently at land use. We don't really have anything to add to the historic conversation. We, are really kind of focused on the zoning ordinance and the special permit criteria and things like that. So I will, with the chair's permission, turn it over to Jonah Temple.
Sure. Or do your department's preservation planners want to say something while we're still in planning?
They're not here tonight.
Oh, I thought you said they were. Oh, you just meant they're here in the city department. Okay.
Yeah, they exist. They're just not here tonight.
Sure.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Let's hear your thoughts on this.
Sure, and I think, Chair, your framing of the issue in terms of what can and cannot be considered absent an amendment was accurate. I also think we addressed this at an earlier meeting when it first came up, and I'm happy to reiterate my view on it, which is historic preservation is not a primary interest zoning is intended to protect or regulate. And as you said, it's not specifically listed as a special permit criteria. So because of that, I don't recommend that historic concerns be a significant focus for this committee, or certainly not a deciding factor in reviewing special permits. But that doesn't mean the committee can't discuss historic issues, can't ask for more information and ask questions regarding historic considerations. It just means, again, that the special permit decisions you're ultimately making aren't higher for historic preservation, and that reliance and deference on the Newton Historical Commission and their review is generally appropriate, as others have said here. I'll just add one other point, which is that while historic preservation is not encompassed in the special permit criteria, it is listed as one of many considerations for site plan approval, which is something that this city council does as part of every special permit approval. It also includes a site plan approval. So it is already in your charge to a degree, as I've been saying. So I don't think any change to the ordinance, to the zoning ordinance, is necessary to be able to talk about historic considerations. And finally, as you've heard, the city has a robust and comprehensive scheme through its historic preservation ordinance. So if there is a desire by the city council to strengthen those protections or expand them, I would recommend focusing on amendments or changes to that ordinance rather than getting at it through the special permit process.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Let's take it into committee and see what other committee members have to say. We'll start with Councilor Lobovitz, then Laredo, then Farrell, you had your, and then I'll take more hands.
Just requesting further clarification of the connection between historic and site plan review. What exactly does that mean?
Mr. Temple, would you answer that for Councilor Lobovitz?
Sure. So generally in zoning, there's two levels of review. There's site plan review, which sometimes applies to by right projects, especially under our new village center zoning. And then there's special permit review, which only allows a project to move forward if a special permit is granted. Because there's somewhat of a quirk in our zoning ordinance, every special permit also requires site plan approval. So we don't usually talk about site plan approval very much here in the land use committee, but it is something that is being granted along with every special permit. And there are listed considerations for site plan approval. I think it's all encompassed within the special permit process, but it is listed there in the zoning ordinance.
Could you be more specific about how historical significance would be considered in a site plan? That's the thing I'm not clear about.
Sure. So the actual language in the site plan approval section of the zoning ordinance says avoidance of the removal or disruption of historic resources on or off site. Historical resources include designated historical structures or sites, historical architectural elements, or archaeological sites.
Not just the building. Archaeological sites, landscape, the site is all included in the historic. So you feel that your question was answered?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Also, Councilor Laredo.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll remind my colleagues, and I think planning and law can speak to this as well. There are often situations in the special permit process when someone is actually preserving a historic structure or part of a historic structure as part of a renovation or improvement, and we treat that with great accolades. We encourage that behavior, which is, by the way, I think is good. But it means by definition that we're factoring in, at least to some degree, the historic aspect of a project. Because if we're saying that historic is a positive, at preserving historic aspects is a positive attribute of a project, then by definition it's a factor. I think, and Attorney Temple, you can clarify if I missed something. I think what you are getting at here is it is a legitimate factor for us to look at, but should not be a primary factor in reaching a decision. I realize that's somewhat of an amorphous line, but I think that's what I'm hearing you saying, and I'd appreciate the clarification if I got that wrong.
No, that's a great way to put it. It may be just simply to call it a secondary factor.
I'm all set, so I'll just add, I very much appreciate Councilor Block and the others docketing the item. And that gives me comfort, frankly, in what we've been doing in the past, which I think is consistent and also respectful of the Historic Commission's role, which is quite different than ours. Thank you.
And they have more expertise in that area than we do. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. And I also want to thank Councilor Buck for docketing this item. I think it brings some really important questions to the fore, although as I listen about the role of land use and in the conversation I had with Councilor Buck earlier, It sometimes seems like land use might be the last resort. And these questions, I think, deserve to be more appropriately addressed to the Historic Commission, but I would love to know, Chairman, your opinion about the actual purpose of demolition delay. Why do you bother putting something on demolition delay? And maybe this isn't the conversation for right now, but it leads to the question that I think Councilor Buck brought up. Demolition delay, to me, as I understand it, is an effort by the Historic Commission to say, we think this is a historic property for serious consideration not to be demolished. And so you say to the developer, think about it for a year. But that's all the power you have to do that there are houses or buildings that are not necessarily landmark properties, but should be considered for other historic reasons, but you don't have any other power to do anything. So I guess I just like, and so when that happens and a developer goes through and a house gets demolished, I can think of several, but it just seems to me that, do you think that that is and again, it might be inappropriate for a conversation with historic preservation, but as I say, it leads here. Do you think that why do you put a building on demolition delay, and do you think there ought to be a stronger law for that?
My role as chair again is to administer the ordinances as written. So the 12-month delay is sort of an economic burden placed on the property owner for going through the demolition process as opposed to renovating the property. If you look at Newton, there are obviously, a handful of properties are exceptional and they're either landmarked, the bigger groupings that are still together are in the local historic districts. And the remainder that's out there has some historical significance, and enough that most of them have some historical significance on their own. Often it's just in the nature of the neighborhood it's there. Obviously, large parts of Newton were built in chunks, so you have commonality over there. I think if you look at any individual property by itself, oftentimes there's not much there. But when it's surrounded by similar properties, it's telling the story there of the history of Newton. But is that something that is worthy of sort of imposing something closer to the level of landmarking? I think the decision by the city council was no. We want to create an incentive to preserve it, but not necessarily something we want to put something more hard-nosed in it with the landmarking.
Thank you for that. I guess I have an opposite opinion about it, which we can continue in another venue, but thank you.
What I heard Mr. Cornelius say was that the demolition delay processes, which is one of the disincentives for removal of demolition raising, is the delay causes particularly developers to evaluate, do I really want to carry the costs of this for a year? And it's a deterrent. Another level of deterrent is to landmark a property, which they do sometimes. We've sometimes done it. I've done it individually as a city councilor. That's a whole nother way of, addressing historic qualities and significance. But it's not something that's listed as a criteria in our special permit process. Do you feel that your question was answered?
Yes, for the moment it was, and I thank you very much. I'd just quickly like to say, in a city where we constantly not only want to add more housing, but we try and save some existing housing, and who has that responsibility? So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, we all do, and we can. Councilor Lebovitz.
One more question.
Sure.
What's been the experience of that with the 12-month delay? We have some sense of that? How many projects were eventually gone through with? How many were changed to preserve the historic significance of the property?
I didn't come with any data on that.
The staff might be able to do that,
Yes,
though.
if we could obtain that data, I think that would be really helpful. Because I think if the goal is to prevent most of it, which I think it is, it would be nice to know whether it's achieving that goal. Thank you.
So along, along the spectrum of deterrence, if an owner, whether it's a property, a private residential owner, or developer, wants to come back sooner than 12 months, if they don't really want to wait out that 12 or sometimes 18-month period, there's a provision that the Historical Commission used where they can come back within 4 months with plans that they then review and can approve. So there are part of it is to cause them to rethink what they're doing. Rather than demolishing and raising buildings, they would prefer preservation of them. Is that correct, Mr. Cornelius?
I'll add in the primary reason for the demolition delay is for the most exceptional properties to give you time to decide whether the landmark can go through the landmark process. That is the primary. The secondary is then the deterrence overall to renovation. Deterrence to demolition, I'm sorry.
We do have a new historic preservation planner, David Lewis, who I met personally for the first time just a couple of weeks ago. That person might be able to give us the answer to the questions that you're asking about what's the result of this process. I think it's a good question.
So I would appreciate that.
Ms. Stain, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I've just heard anecdotally, and you won't find data on this, that developers will avoid properties that they think might end up facing demolition delay and then focus in on the less historic properties for redevelopment, which fits with some of the data we've been looking at in tear downs, which, you know, it coincides that a lot of the properties that are more recently built, well, from the 50s and 60s that are smaller in scale and on larger parcels have been torn down, but also are not going to be facing demolition delay.
Well, anything in Newton that's 50 years or older comes under the auspices of that. And
yeah, I guess. So then the 50s,
a lot of properties.
Okay. So the ranches from the 1950s could face demolition delay, but yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from Land Use Committee members? This is a discussion, and as I understand it, Councilor Block, I don't want to speak for you, but from having talked to you about this a few times, I gathered that you would like us to consider adding this aspect to our criteria. So if people have thoughts on that, now's a good time to speak up if you haven't yet. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you. I guess I'm in agreement with Attorney Temple. It should not be a criteria. It should be left up to the Historical Commission whether or not to impose a demo delay or not, and whether or not to landmark a property or not. It shouldn't be a criteria for the special permit. There's really no way to objectively measure the historic quality of a building. So I would not make it a criteria. Thank you.
Councilor Leary.
I'm in agreement with our legal department and with Councilor Lucas, but I will say, well, I don't think it's our purview to necessarily dive into historic preservation, though I know it's something that we all do care about. I do rely on the Historic Commission to go through that. But there's another, I know the city has done some historical surveys, and Madam Chair, you may be more familiar with this than I am, but I would like to see more proactive identification of possible historic buildings and homes and identify them well ahead of time and have that part of a survey that I think we've done in the past. And maybe that's something we could choose to do again, and not just necessarily landmarked properties, but maybe the ones that are more overlooked and areas that we would like to take another look at. So that's one thing that I would suggest we go about being more proactive. I don't think coming before land use for a special permit is the time to do that, frankly. Thank you.
Mr. Cornelius, did you want to say something to that?
Sure, there has been a tremendous survey of Newton of the historical resources. It's actually in the map geo system.
It's
Actually pulled that
Are you
away.
talking about the Macris survey?
There's the Macris, but we've also built it into, I'm gonna get the name of it wrong, Map Geo that has, includes the assessor's database. I'm getting the name wrong. There's a layer in there for historic properties because huge parts of Newton have already gone through a historical survey, and there's been funding for an additional survey as part of the redoing of the demolition delay ordinance to look at properties sort of from the mid-century on. Now that we've, as Ms. Dane said, we've gone past the 50s, we're into the 70s now, though that group has not been surveyed, and there's a survey going on for those properties.
Oh, there is currently a
Yeah.
survey going on for those properties?
That's
Okay.
what I was just going to mention. They want to do one on postmodern properties. The closer we get to now. And there are a lot of postmodern properties, we might think of them as ranch houses in Newton. But so, yeah, it's a good point. Two of them do exist. One is going to get started, I believe. I'm not exactly sure where that postmodern one is. I think that was, a tie-up with funding.
Yeah, I think it was tied to funding and resources. That's, I
Yeah.
just wanted to know if sometimes we have the best intentions and we don't always follow through with them. So I'm glad to hear that that's being planned.
But good points, and I think it's a really important thing for us to be talking about, and I'm glad you raised it, and I'm glad we have a better understanding as a group about the different roles different groups, commissions, and boards have on this. I see that Councillor Getz has joined us virtually via Zoom and has her hand raised. Councillor Getz.
Hi, thank you, Chair Kelly. I actually think that this is a relevant conversation, and I appreciate Councillor Block bringing it to the forefront. I think there are a couple of pieces in this process that need to be discussed. I previously had a conversation with Kat Kemet about a board order and how the historic relevance of a property was not even mentioned in the board order. And I think, when a special permit is being considered, but there, for me, I sort of would like there's sort of a contextual understanding being issued and discussed when considering a special permit. But if someone is diligent, they can actually go through all of the documents for a property, and then, they will see the Historic Commission's outcome of the review of the property. And many times, if there is a waiver, there's going to be an approved plan, that comes forward. So I think that there's an interlinkness between the two processes, but I do think it's important for there to be an appreciation of the historic significance of a property when considering a special permit. And I also think it's relevant in terms of having that kind of documentation and statements, issued in the board order. Because I was really surprised to read about a property that had high historic significance and there's no mention of it, and it's sort of like, it's a very relevant piece of the conversation. So I think it's, it can't be, we can't silo the information. I think it's really important to sort of have it all considered when going through the special permit process. So I want this conversation, it would be good to keep this conversation going, because I do think there is importance and significance in terms of, having that kind of piece interwoven through the special permit process.
Thank you, Councillor Getz. I guess I'll just say that whenever something comes up like that, say in your ward or any of our wards, and we're aware of that, and we've seen a memo and it's not reflected, we all have the ability to input and say, let's add that to the report or your considerations. As has been discussed a couple times tonight, we are not at all precluded from doing that. It is absolutely an okay part of our site plan review aspect of what we do when we grant a special permit. So I don't know what property you're talking about, but I wish we had caught that sooner. I'm not sure we need to keep this conversation open for us to all realize that we can mention things like that. We can bring it up. We can be sure it is considered when
when it happens like that. We can talk again, perhaps offline, about what that property was or any others, perhaps in Ward 5. I would,
It's sorry to interject, but it's actually a property under consideration right now. So I will reach out to you.
yeah, let us know. Okay. And let planning know.
Yep, I
You
will.
know, absolutely. I mean, we all have a piece of that. We're all part of this bigger village of awareness. Are there any other questions? Councillor Block?
I really appreciate everyone's time thinking about this a little bit. When I listen to Jonah Temple, I hear something a little different from what I think Councillor Lucas heard. So I just want to say that, and I don't know if that's my misconception, but I heard him say that it was appropriate for a secondary consideration, which means to me, it's appropriate for us to talk about, to be aware of, and to weigh as we decide how we're going to vote on particular determinations. Not that it's the primary factor, but also not that it's out of the scope of our role. And that's how I think about this factor. For me, several people have mentioned incentives and disincentives, whether it's to create housing, whether it's to preserve certain structures. To me, it feels like we're not spending enough time figuring out how to fine tune this process. We have the Historic Commission doing its work. We have Land Use Committee and the City Council doing its work. So why shouldn't the City Council, taking the Historic Commission's work and the staff of the Planning Department who specialize in historic preservation analysis, why shouldn't we be reviewing that? If it's a close call, then maybe we don't approve the special permit. The landowner is perfectly capable of building by right, and there are, just dimensions which they have to meet, and then it doesn't come before us. And then the effort to, let's say, delay the demolition, that's expired, then they're free to pursue that under the by right provisions. But the special permit process puts a special responsibility on us. And that's why I think this may be a tool that we haven't been using, and perhaps we should think harder about. There are other aspects of the historic preservation statutes which can come at this also from different angles, but that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Block. One thing that has been clearer tonight to me after this whole conversation is that it's not an off-limits topic for us. We don't have to avoid it. We can bring it up. We can think about it when it's appropriate. So as I said to Councillor Getz, or you or anyone else, if it feels like a relevant part of a special permit application, let's have the conversation, like run it through planning. Let's talk about it. I see one more hand, not a committee member, Councillor Maliki. You are one of the docketers of this.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, I was at a recent historical commission meeting where it seemed like 2 or 3 times in the same meeting, Mr. Cornelius was sort of almost begging the city council to do something because the historical commission, had no power to kind of prevent the eventual teardowns other than the demolition delay, which in my observation, it's more of a tiny speed bump, not sometimes it does, I think, help with the incentivizing a renovation instead of a complete tear down. But I think it was Ms. Dane said she thinks developers avoid properties that might have a demolition delay imposed. You could have fooled me because I've watched enough historical commission meetings to see, you know, some of the same developers over and over coming in and, you know, with properties that demolition delay gets imposed, but they keep buying them and tearing them down. You know, Mr. Cornelius was basically saying, you know, it's up to the city council to do something about if we don't like the pace at which we're losing houses, we, the city council, you know, need to do something about it with zoning measures. The other comment I wanted to make was some of the most destructive stuff that has happened has been by right projects that never come to us. You know, we lost 29 Greenwood, we lost 959 Chestnut Street, the house that fell down before 29 Greenwood, I think it was before. Recently one in Nonantum that the Historical Commission is dealing with, you know, a violation because a house that was supposed to be partially preserved fell down. And I believe, as I understand it, the same developer involved in that house is currently before the Upper Falls Local Historic District Commission with another, you know, ad renovation project. So who knows what will happen there. I'm actually worried about some of our landmark buildings in village centers that, you know, with the village center zoning, we've sort of handed away our authority to have any special permit influence in village centers. So something like the, you know, the building next to the Masonic Building, the building next to the Davis Hotel or the Robinson Block in West Newton Square, if those get developed, I don't know how we protect whether it's massive excavation or the, you know, the demolition process and the impact, you know, the percussive impacts or whatever from damaging historic structures next door, because it's, you know, it's certainly happening in other cities like Philadelphia, especially. People are, you know, tearing down or gutting row houses and the house next door becomes uninhabitable because it's not safe anymore. So that's one of my concerns that I don't think we've addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. You're right. A lot of what we see is happening by right and not through the special permit process. Any other closing? Come to the microphone again. Last word, Mr. Cornelius.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to go home as well. The point Councilor Maliki brought out with that, which is if the zoning allows for a much larger building that's what's on the site, that's a huge incentive to demolition. And the case in point is really Oak Hill Park, where the zoning allows much larger buildings. If you look at land prices down at Oak Hill Park, the land is more valuable than the land with a house on it, because you can put something much larger in there. So that was the discussion there, which is the extent, you know, that the zoning doesn't match the pattern of housings there, you're going to have this big incentive for demolition. And if I could, the last piece I put in there talking about potential process with Mr. Block, what I put in there is I would hope that to the extent we have, Historic Commission has approved something that then comes in for special permit, that you would sort of defer or go along with that action, thinking that we got the result when it comes to the historical nature of it. To hopefully take that off there, as opposed to something we have not approved. That's a little bit different story. The other piece you could think about timing, which is whether something should come to Historical Commission before the special permit process starts.
Yes, I think so. My opinion. Any other last comments? If not, I would definitely entertain a motion to NAN this discussion item. Anyone? No one? We're not going to keep it, Councilor Block.
I'll propose no action necessary.
Thank you, Councilor Block. I think we can do a voice vote on that. She sells seashells by the seashore. All in favor of NAN on this item, and thank you, Councilor Block, for bringing it to our attention. Please say aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Dane, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Cornelius, Planning and Law for coming and helping give us your perspectives on this. And good night, everyone. We're adjourned.